Chapter 10. The Forgotten Path. They were only supposed to be gone for the weekend. A 2-day loop through a national forest that barely registered on most maps. No permit required, no rangers, just an unmaintained network of trails that crisscrossed the mountains like veins. The kind of place you went to disappear for a while and come back with a sunburn and a better outlook. That's what they expected. They were wrong, because somewhere near the 3rd mile they stepped onto the wrong trail, and the forest never let them leave. They noticed it just after the overlook. The map said to stay left at the fork, but there was no fork, just a narrow, overgrown path marked by 3 stacked stones and a wooden post too weathered to read. "Shortcut?" Alex suggested, brushing brambles aside. "No trail marker," said Bryn, frowning. "It's a game trail," Milo offered, crouching to examine the dirt, "but it's wide. Could have been used before. Looks like someone cleared it out." Jessa was already 10 feet down it. "If it loops back to the main trail, we save at least an hour." "I don't like it," said Bryn. "We didn't come out here to get lost." Alex shrugged. "That's kind of the point though, right?" 5 minutes later, they all followed. The temperature dropped noticeably as soon as they left the main trail. Not a sharp plunge, just enough to raise goosebumps and quicken breath. The trees grew denser, pressing close on either side like walls of green and gray. Moss grew thicker here, soft and deep, muffling their steps like felt beneath their boots. Milo stopped after 15 minutes. He glanced at the trunk of a birch tree and blinked twice. There was a marking carved into the bark, circular, spiraled inward, but not perfectly, a little off-center, a little uncomfortable. "Did one of you see this?" he asked. Jessa walked back and tilted her head. "What is that? Some kind of symbol?" Alex squinted. "Looks like a maze, or an eye, or both," Bryn muttered. They moved on. More trees were marked. Each one bore a similar shape, though the spirals varied slightly in size and direction. "Some kind of old forest boundary?" Jessa suggested. "Hikers used to leave symbols. Wayfinding." Milo didn't answer. He wasn't sure why, but the marks made him feel like he was being watched, not by eyes, but by memory, like something in the forest remembered him, even though he'd never been here before. The path narrowed, then widened again. Time lost its rhythm. The sun was visible through the branches, but it no longer moved. It just hovered there, fixed behind the gauze of leaves, like a light bulb straining through fabric. Alex checked his phone. No signal. GPS still thinks we're on the trailhead. Bryn checked her watch. It blinked, 12:38 p.m. An hour later, she checked again, 12:38 p.m. Jessa laughed. "Guess we found the dead zone," but no one else laughed with her. They stopped when they reached the clearing. It opened up without warning. 1 second they were surrounded by forest, then the trees pulled back, revealing a wide, circular space. No grass, just soft black soil and several large, upright stones arranged in a perfect ring. A stone circle. Old. Too smooth. Wrong. The stones weren't covered in moss or vines. They looked untouched. "I don't like this," Bryn said. "This feels wrong." Jessa turned in a slow circle. "How did this get here?" "People build things," Alex offered weakly. "Not like this," Milo said, because he had noticed something none of the others had. The symbols were carved into the stones too, but this time they were glowing. Faintly. Pulsing. "Guys," he said, backing up, "we need to go, now." Then the hum started. At first, it sounded like wind. Then it resolved into something deeper, more tonal, a slow, vibrating frequency like a didgeridoo or a bowed cello, felt more than heard. The dirt shifted beneath their feet. The spiral symbols flickered like embers. Milo grabbed Jess's wrist. "We have to move." "Which way?" Alex asked. Bryn turned in a slow circle. "The way we came in. Where's the trail?" But it was gone. Just forest again. Dense. Thick. No path. No trailhead. Nothing. Only the circle, and the marks, and the hum. They ran anyway. No one argued. The tree line swallowed them in moments, and the shadows deepened instantly. The air grew still, choked. Their breath came louder now, not just from exertion, but panic. It didn't take long before they knew they were no longer in the same forest. It was the colors that gave it away. Green was wrong, muted to gray. The sky above looked too deep, like space peeking through canvas. The moss no longer cushioned their feet. It clung to them, tugging at their ankles like fabric soaked in glue. Alex was the first to fall. He screamed and vanished down a slope none of them had seen coming. Bryn and Milo skidded to a stop, peering over the ledge. "Alex!" A pause. Then a muffled voice from below. "I'm okay. I hit a ledge. Just don't come down this way. I'll find a way back up." "Stay put. We'll come around." But no one could figure out which way was around. Jessa pointed off to the left. "There. Looks like it slopes down gently. Let's go." They followed the new trail, if it could be called that. It twisted hard left, then looped around. Trees arched unnaturally, bending overhead in long claw-like curves. The shadows grew so deep that the sun disappeared entirely, except it hadn't set. The light was still out there. It just couldn't reach this place anymore. They followed the path for what felt like half an hour. No sign of Alex. No sign of the ledge. And when they stopped to catch their breath, Bryn said it aloud. "This isn't just a wrong turn. We're somewhere else." No one disagreed, because they all felt it now, the weight pressing in from all sides. Like the forest didn't end, it folded. Like time here didn't pass, it pooled. Milo sat down heavily on a tree stump. "We should have stayed out of the circle. We should have—" Then he stopped, because he just looked down at the base of the tree next to him and saw another symbol. This one carved into the trunk with razor precision, and beneath it something new. A word. Welcome. "What is this place?" Jessa asked. Bryn's voice came slow, thin. "It's where people go when they step wrong." They all turned to her. "I heard a story once. When I was a kid, my grandmother told me. She was Haudenosaunee, part of the Mohawk Nation. She said there were old paths through the earth, not just roads, fractures, places where the world split wrong." "You think this is one of those?" Milo asked. Bryn nodded. "She called them forgetting paths. You step on one, and the world forgets you ever existed. Time forgets you. Your body keeps walking, but your soul can't catch up." Jessa hugged herself. "How do we get off it?" Bryn's voice barely rose above a whisper. "I don't think we do." Then something howled. Not a wolf, not human, something wide-mouthed and hollow. The kind of sound that turns your organs cold. It came from the trees behind them, back where they had left the circle. Or maybe from under the trees. The ground trembled once. "Run," Bryn said. And they did. Through moss and rot and trees that leaned too far in. Something followed. They didn't see it, but they heard the rhythm of its movement. Not steps, not running, like dragging. Like something enormous shifting just under the skin of the world. Milo tripped. Bryn stopped to help him. Jessa was gone. She'd turned the corner ahead and vanished like smoke. When they finally stopped again, they found a clearing. But not like the one before. This one was made of mirrors. Dozens of them. Old, tarnished glass nailed to the trunks of trees. Each one was cracked or warped, reflecting strange fragments of forest. Some reflected stars. Others reflected on themselves. And in one, Milo saw Alex. Still climbing, still lost, still looping the same moment again and again. Calling out, falling, calling out, falling. The mirror pulsed once, then went still. "I think we found where the path ends," Bryn said softly. Milo's reflection nodded in one mirror, but he hadn't moved. And in the others, there was no reflection at all. Milo turned away from the mirrors, chest heaving. His skin was slick with cold sweat, but it wasn't just fear anymore. It was the growing sense that something inside him had started to unravel. Not panic, not even madness, something more mechanical, as if the longer he stayed on this path, the more the forest was tuning his body into something else, a frequency, a shape. Bryn stared into one of the mirrors, her hands clenched into fists. She didn't blink. Her reflection didn't either. "Do you see it?" she asked. He hesitated. "See what?" "The thing behind me." He stepped forward. Her reflection in the warped glass was off by a half-second, too slow, like a buffering video. In that fractured frame, behind her shoulder was a shadow. No features, no eyes, just a smear of black stretching up the tree line like something rising from the dirt. He turned around quickly. Nothing there. But the hair on his arms rose anyway. "We need to move," he said. They turned away from the mirrors and followed a narrow trail that had seemingly formed on its own through the underbrush. It sloped downward and curved in unnatural angles. The trees here grew impossibly tall, their trunks fused in some places like the forest had welded them together. Moss spilled down in sheets, veining across the ground like a network of capillaries. And then they saw what had become of Jessa. She was kneeling in a shallow depression in the earth, her face turned upward, mouth open, but no sound escaping. Her eyes were milky, unfocused, and her hands were buried wrist-deep in the soil, the fingers twitching like broken antennae. "Jessa!" Bryn ran forward and dropped to her knees, grabbing at her shoulders. "What the hell? What happened to her?" Milo crouched beside them and saw it immediately. Jessa's skin wasn't just pale, it had begun to flake. Where the light hit her cheek, it peeled in tiny geometric scales, revealing something dark and glistening underneath. Not blood, not flesh, it looked like polished stone, or glass. Bryn tried to lift her hands from the ground and screamed. Jessa's wrists were fused to the earth. Where her skin met the dirt, veins of black material webbed into the soil like roots. Something had grown into her, or maybe something had grown out of her. She twitched, then whispered a single word. "Listen." Milo leaned in. "Jessa, what's doing this?" "Not doing. Becoming." Then she shuddered, spasmed once, and her head jerked back at an unnatural angle. Her mouth opened wide, too wide, and from it came a deep, wet gurgling noise like something rising from a clogged drain. And then a hand pushed its way out. It tore its way up her throat and emerged through her mouth, pale, with fingers like splinters of wood and nails made of polished obsidian. The rest of Jessa's body convulsed violently, and something began to crawl out of her chest cavity. The skin didn't tear, it peeled open like husks, splitting along natural seams. Milo grabbed Bryn and yanked her backward, both of them falling onto the moss. Jessa collapsed forward. The thing that had grown inside her, a warped, infant-sized figure slick with black resin and bent limbs, fell out onto the ground and twitched. It made no sound, but its body vibrated with the low frequency they'd been hearing since the circle. It stared at them, without eyes, then began to crawl back into the forest on all fours, trailing a ribbon of what might once have been Jessa's spine. Bryn gagged and doubled over. "We have to get the fuck out of here." Milo's voice was barely audible. "It's growing things. Through us." They moved as fast as they could. Every time they stopped, the forest had changed. The trees would twist behind them, forming different paths, some collapsing, others forming new routes ahead like tunnels. The air throbbed with pressure, and the further they walked, the more their thoughts lost clarity. Words came slower. Colors lost meaning. Milo realized they hadn't spoken in over an hour. Bryn was walking like a machine, one foot in front of the other, face slack with shock. Milo grabbed her shoulder. "Stop! We need to stop for a second." She blinked at him. When he looked down, he saw blood leaking from her ears. "Bryn, Jesus!" She touched her face and stared at the red on her fingers like she'd never seen blood before. "I think I'm bleeding into the sound." Milo didn't understand. Then he heard it too. Not just the frequency, but voices. His own, Bryn's, Jessa's, repeating fragments of conversation from earlier in the hike. "I don't like it. Didn't come out here to get lost. Shortcut? Stay left at the fork." Over and over. The forest was recording them and playing it back. At first he thought it was mimicry, but now he wasn't sure. It didn't sound like someone was repeating them. It sounded like the forest was trying to learn their cadence, their thought patterns, the spaces between their words, their silences. Something was building syntax. Bryn suddenly looked up. "There's something behind us." They turned. A figure stood at the edge of the trees, humanoid, covered in gray moss and caked dirt, but its head was wrong, too long, angled back like it had been broken and reset. Its arms dragged at its sides, fingertips twitching. Its face was Alex's, but not quite. The features were off, like someone had tried to reconstruct him from memory, sculpting a version of him that forgot the nuances of human expression. "Milo," Bryn whispered. "That's not him." The figure opened its mouth, and Alex's voice came out. "Don't leave me down here." Then the jaw dislocated with a loud crack, splitting wide as a second face pushed out of its mouth, Jessa's face, her eyes opened wide and screaming silently. Bryn grabbed Milo's arm. "Run!" They didn't stop this time. The forest bent around them in tighter spirals, the symbols returning, not just carved into trees but etched into the sky above them in long contrails of light. The ground bled in places, soft humus opening up like wounds. Milo saw something breathing beneath the moss, rising and falling like lungs the size of a field. And always, that frequency. Low, hungry, curious. Eventually, they collapsed near what looked like a pool, a narrow, stagnant body of water shaped like a perfect ellipse. Bryn crawled to the edge and stared into it. Her reflection was missing. Milo saw his. But it didn't move when he did. Instead, it turned its head slowly and smiled, a wide, brittle grin that split the face too far up the cheeks. His reflection reached out, and Milo fell back, heart thudding. "We're not going to make it," Bryn said flatly. "No, we are. You saw what it did to Jessa." Milo didn't reply. He was staring at the far side of the pool now, where something was emerging, not walking, forming. A figure taking shape from the shadows and light like film developing in water. At first it had no face. Then it had dozens, flickering over its head like a projector running frames out of order. One of them was his mother's. One, a child's. One, his own. The creature stepped forward, and each footstep made the pool ripple with a sharp metallic tone, like glass being tapped. It opened its mouth. But instead of sound, the trees around them screamed, all of them. Branches shook, leaves twisted inward, the sky above cracked like a mirror, revealing a second sky behind it, one that pulsed with a deep red glow. Milo grabbed Bryn's arm and pulled her up. No mirrors, no faces, just forward. She stumbled after him. The forest wailed behind them, and something chased them now, not footsteps but reflections. Every shiny surface, water, broken glass, smooth stones, showed them running, but in the wrong direction, in the past. Loops inside loops. As they ran, Milo saw images in the trees. Himself as a child, Bryn screaming in a hospital bed, Jessa holding a map. Moments that never happened, or hadn't happened yet. And still they ran, until they broke through the final tree line and stood once more in the stone circle. They didn't remember turning around. One moment they were running, lungs screaming, the forest bending behind them like it wanted to crush them whole, and the next, they were back within the stone circle. The trees parted like obedient guards. The forest had guided them back. The clearing was different now. The soil, once black and soft like damp ash, had turned the color of dried blood. Cracked, pitted, damp in places, but not with water. The ground looked like it had bled, then clotted. Faint steam coiled up from beneath the surface, carrying the sickly sweet scent of decay and iron. Milo gagged as the stench hit him fully, old blood and wet copper, tangled with something vaguely floral, like rotting lilies. The stones that had once stood weathered and silent were now alive. Not moving, not pulsing with visible force, but changed. Their spiral carvings were deeper now, etched so far into the rock that the grooves wept thin threads of some tar-black liquid. It dribbled down their surfaces in glistening trails and pooled at the bases, soaking into the cracked earth with slow, rhythmic sucks, as if the circle itself were breathing through the soil. Bryn dropped to her knees, gasping. Her hands instinctively touched the earth before her, and when she lifted them again, they were coated in a thick, viscous red-brown sludge. At first she recoiled, then paused, blinking at her palms. "It's warm," she murmured, "and it's moving." Milo rushed to her, pulling her away. The soil stuck to her skin like it had a will of its own. He wiped it off with his sleeve, but it smeared instead of coming clean. It had already begun to sink in, darkening the skin beneath her fingernails, creeping like ink through the lines in her palms. "We need to get out," he said, breath ragged. "We were here before. This is where it started. It's using this place like a fulcrum, like a wheel." Bryn stood, swaying slightly. Her pupils had dilated so far they swallowed her irises. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. "You feel it, don't you? The spirals. They're spinning inside us now. I can feel them under my skin." Milo stepped back from her, staring. Her neck twitched slightly, and he realized she was vibrating. Subtle, almost imperceptible tremors running from her spine to her fingertips. The forest around the circle held its breath. The trees were no longer swaying. They were tilted, leaning inward like they were drawn to the center. Their branches curled together above the clearing, forming a vague cocoon, half cage, half kiln. Then the ground shifted. Not like an earthquake. There was no rumble, no jolt. It was fluid, like a pressure change in a sealed room. The very center of the circle, where the earth had cracked in a spiderweb pattern, began to buckle, not down, but up. From beneath the soil, something began to rise. It was slow at first, like it had been sleeping deeply and was reluctant to wake. The dirt parted in wide, groaning slabs, pushed aside by something vast. A shape emerged, thick and angular, made of the same stone as the spiraled monoliths, but slick with the black tar that dripped from their faces. It rose higher. Not a creature, not a structure. A doorway. A tall, hexagonal frame of fused stone and something organic, wrapped in twisted cords like tendons. The center of the arch shimmered, not with light, but with motion, like water under skin. It didn't reflect the world. It showed another one, a world that bent wrong, geometries impossible to understand, angles that shouldn't connect yet did, colors without names, shapes that weren't symmetrical but still rotated in perfect harmony. Bryn took a step toward it. Milo grabbed her wrist. "Don't." "I think it's too late," she said. "It's calling us now. We're the key, the last pieces." Her skin was darkening again, veins rising, skin mottling. Milo looked back at the monoliths. The spirals were rotating now. He could see it, physically see them turning deeper, cutting into stone that should have been immovable. The noise returned, that low hum layered with static and the distant echo of his own voice whispering things he hadn't said yet. "Let it in. Open the gate. You are the signal." He looked back at the gateway. The surface had begun to ripple now, forming vague silhouettes. Figures. Something was on the other side, waiting, pressing against the veil. And then one of the spirals on the nearest stone snapped open. A slit tore through the symbol like a lid being peeled back. From the wound in the stone, a hand emerged. Long fingers, jointed wrong, covered in rough, glistening bark. It groped blindly at the air before pulling its body through. It wasn't walking, it was unfolding. A being of roots and bone and jagged angles, all teeth and spiral scars. Its head was flat, like a stone hammer, and its chest opened and closed like gills. More spirals were carved into its ribcage, dozens, all vibrating independently. Milo shouted, yanking Bryn back. She screamed, not at the creature, but at her own body. The veins in her arms were bulging, rising beneath her skin like wires being pulled taut. Her fingers were twitching in rhythm with the spirals. She fell to her knees, convulsing, and blood erupted from her mouth in a thick black stream. "Bryn!" He grabbed her, but she shoved him back with surprising force. "Get away," she choked. "It wants me. I'm already part of it." "No!" She screamed again, this time wordless. Her spine arched, her skin split open along the veins, not with tearing, but precision, like incisions made by an intelligent knife. From the wounds, the black tendrils emerged, thin, wet cords of signal flesh and resin reaching outward like roots. They dug into the soil, anchoring her body to the ground. Bryn's head lolled back, her mouth opened, and the spiral symbols bloomed across her tongue like blooming fungus. The creature watched her without expression. It stepped toward her, and she welcomed it. Milo ran. He didn't know where he was going. There was no path now, only forest, no light, no sky, just trees folded like curtain fabric and the endless hum of a spiral signal spinning out of control. He pushed past trunks that bled dark sap, over moss that hissed with heat, and through air that buzzed like an electric fence. Behind him, the noise grew, not the creature's, Bryn's. She was speaking in two voices now, hers and something deeper, a language that wasn't meant for the human throat. He runs. He resists. He will return. The trees blurred, then broke, and suddenly, light, a clearing, familiar, the trailhead. He stumbled onto the gravel, falling hard onto his hands and knees. His lungs were raw, his throat burned, but the air was clean. There was a car parked at the edge of the lot, his car, untouched. The sun was out again, high above, and his watch blinked. 12:38 p.m. He stared at it for a long time. Then he looked back at the trail. The trees were still, quiet, like they had never moved, like nothing had happened. Milo stood slowly, legs trembling. The hum had faded from his ears. His pulse was slowing. He was out, but Bryn wasn't. And the spirals? He looked down. Etched into his palms, in the dried black blood he'd smeared while trying to clean her hands, were faint spiral impressions. Moving, just barely. Turning in place, not left or right, inward. Milo didn't sleep the first night. He checked into a roadside motel an hour south of the trailhead, locked every door and window, and sat on the edge of the bed with the lights on until dawn. The silence was unbearable. He turned on the television just to drown out the ringing in his ears. But it didn't help, because the hum wasn't in the room. It wasn't even in the world. It was inside him now. He could feel it every time he exhaled. A vibration in the back of his throat, a low frequency building in his bones. It wasn't constant, just enough to remind him it was still there, tuning him, aligning. When he finally passed out from exhaustion, the dreams came. Not dreams exactly, memories, but they weren't his. He saw the spiral from above, huge and carved into a valley of bone. He saw figures like Bryn fused to the forest floor, their bodies flowering with black roots and wide, flat mouths humming like old radios. He saw doorways, dozens of them, each one opening into a different world, a different time. The same symbol etched in every threshold, a spiral. And in the center of them all, him, standing inside the circle, eyes empty, hands outstretched. Milo woke up screaming, but no sound came out. He tried to live normally after that. He didn't tell anyone what happened. No one would believe him, and he wasn't even sure he believed it himself. He told Bryn's parents she'd gone missing on a trail near the ridge, that they'd been separated. The rangers were searching. The lies came easily, which scared him. A week passed. Then 2. He stopped seeing people. He unplugged his TV, discarded his phone. Every speaker in his house emitted soft static when he passed. His microwave refused to work. The light bulbs flickered in rhythm to the pulse inside his skull. Then came the mimics. At first it was just shadows in the corner of his vision, shapes that weren't there, faces half-formed in mirror glass. Then he started hearing Bryn's voice, soft, indistinct, humming something under her breath, a lullaby he didn't recognize. She would whisper his name from the hallway, just outside his door, just inside his head. "You're still tuned." He stopped leaving the house. One night he woke to find dirt in his bed, not scattered, piled, a mound of dark soil, damp and warm. His hands were stained black to the wrists, even though he hadn't left the house. And there, pressed into the headboard, was a fresh spiral, carved deep, still wet. He snapped, drove through the night, back to the forest, back to the trailhead. But the forest didn't look the same. The trees had grown denser, as if they had moved closer during his absence. The sign was gone, so was the ranger box. Even the gravel parking lot had shrunk, eaten at the edges by creeping moss.
But the trail was still there, and so was the path, the forgotten path. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight toward the clearing. The trees didn't resist. They welcomed him. It took less than an hour. No wrong turns, no illusions, just a long, narrowing walk through bending trees and shifting air. The sky dimmed until it was nothing but a deep maroon overhead. The spiral carvings were waiting, etched into every trunk like an invitation. And then he was back. The stone circle had changed again. Now it was alive. The monoliths groaned softly, the spirals spinning with thick, wet noises. Tendrils of light flickered between them like veins made of static. The air smelled of blood and ozone. In the center, the doorway stood open, and Bryn was there. Or what was left of her. She stood still, head tilted back, mouth slack and humming. Her body had fused to the roots beneath her feet, thin black cords anchoring her to the earth like spider silk. Her skin was pale and waxy, and her veins had gone completely black. But her eyes moved when he stepped into the circle. They locked on him, and she smiled. "You brought the last piece." He froze. "The gate only opens when all paths converge," she said. "And you never really left. You were just sent ahead." The hum grew louder. Milo dropped to his knees. His skin was burning, not from heat, but from the vibration. The frequency inside him had reached its final pitch, and something was answering. The spiral in the dirt at the center of the circle began to open, not just visually, but physically. The ground uncoiled, revealing a deep black hole that dropped away into forever. A shaft carved with faces, with memories, with versions of himself, all screaming silently. And then he arose. It wasn't a creature. It was a concept given shape, a knot of thought and time and will, flesh folded into ideas, spiral-limbed, mouthless, boneless, moving like a dream collapsing into nightmare. It hovered above the pit, then slowly reached for Milo. He screamed, but his scream came from behind him. He turned and saw himself standing at the edge of the circle, an exact copy. Same clothes, same hair, same terror in the eyes. The new Milo stepped forward. So did another, and another. Dozens now, all exact, all converging. "You are the spiral," Bryn said, voice giddy now. "All paths begin and end with you." The copies moved toward the real Milo. They didn't speak, they just reached out. He tried to run, but the forest had bent inward. There was no exit. When he opened his eyes again, he stood in the center of the clearing, alone. No doorway, no spiral, just stones. He felt calm, empty. He turned to leave and saw the trail again. Daylight streamed in from the trees. The forest was normal, peaceful. He walked back to the parking lot, got in his car, and drove home. No one remembered Bryn. No one remembered the trip. Even his journal entries from that weekend were blank. He returned to work, laughed again, felt okay. Until one morning, shaving, he looked in the mirror and saw the spiral turning slowly in his right eye, and smiled.
Thank you for listening to this story. Your support means a lot and helps keep these tales coming. If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to subscribe and follow for more dark and immersive stories just like this one. New horrors await. Don't miss what's coming next.